Here with me is the Samsung Galaxy A54 and I've been using it for a while now, and here is my review of the smartphone. The Galaxy A54 comes in this white box which is rather slim for a reason because it comes without a charger. And opening the box you could see the phone. The phone that I have with me is purple in color, even though the camera kind of captures it to be blue in color. And putting the phone aside, there is two paperworks. One of it is in Chinese and the other is in English. And putting that aside, we have a USB-C to USB-C cable. And lastly, the SIM eject too. So setting up the phone is rather standard until I reach this page where it says there are lists of essential and recommended apps. Firstly from Singapore, secondly from Samsung, and thirdly they classify it as essential applications. All these applications are pre-installed in the smartphone. However, if you do not want those applications, you could uninstall it afterwards once you reach the home page. So starting with the software side of things, this phone comes in Android 13 with Samsung One UI 5.1, and throughout using the phone, I have two updates so far. Firstly is the February security patch, and secondly is the April security patch. Apart from the security patches, there are a couple of tweaks and improvements as stated in the changelog. And moving on to the storage, the phone comes in either 128 or 256 gigs of internal storage, which mine is 128. And I'm glad that the base storage is not lower than that, because if I were to go into the storage, the system applications actually occupies like 1/4 of the storage that I have currently. But the phone allows you to insert a micro SD card for you to expand your storage, or if you want to, you could just opt for the 256 gigs of internal storage. And for the RAM, it comes with 8 gigs of RAM, whether you choose the 128 or 256 gigs of internal storage. And if you want to, you could expand the RAM with this thing called the RAM Plus in the software settings, which is turned on by default at 4 gigs of RAM Plus, and you could choose between 2, 4, 6, 8, or even switch it off if you do not want to, because the way RAM Plus works is that it takes up your internal storage and transfer it to your RAM to expand the amount of RAM you have in total. So with that amount of RAM, I could switch between apps without having the app to reload each time if I were to place them in the background. And as you can see, even if I were to open a number of applications and switch back to the app, which is quite a number of applications away, the application is still in the background and I could just instantly continue from where I left off. But of course, RAM isn't everything because the chipset matters, and the one that is in this phone is the Exynos 1380. And I feel that the chipset is not too bad given the mid-range capability of it. The way I use my phone is mainly on social media and browsing the web, not much gaming, so for that it doesn't really matter for me. But the difference that I could feel, it's probably like taking photos, especially using night mode. It does take a while to actually process the image, but then that's alright as long as you are not rushing anywhere. And moving to the exterior of the phone, both the front and back of the phone is made out of glass and the side is a plastic frame. I feel that the back of it is not too much of a fingerprint magnet. However, it is a little slippery for my experience, and I'm someone who actually uses the phone without a phone case. As for the screen, the phone is a 6.4-inch Full HD Super AMOLED display, and it has 120Hz refresh rate, which is nice to know, and it is also defaulted to the adaptive refresh rate. You can either choose that or the standard. There is no way for you to put it at 120Hz all the way. And the screen, in my opinion, under the sun is very readable. In terms of specifications, it supports up to 1000 nits, and that is a pretty high number. And one more thing about the screen is that it is a flat screen, and I like how uniform and minimal the bezel is surrounding all 4 sides of the screen. And going around the phone, starting from the top, you have the SIM card / micro SD card slot tray and a microphone beside it. And on the right, you have the volume rocker as well as the power button. And at the bottom, you have a down-firing speaker together with 2 microphones and a USB-C connector in the middle. And at the left is completely clean, no buttons, no ports, no nothing at all. So 2 additional things that the phone has that you can't see is firstly the IP rating. It has an IP67 water and dust resistant, which is good to have because I kind of like it in case of any accidental splashes of water. And secondly, it has NFC on board, which means I could use Google Pay to make my payments or even for transportations. Putting that aside, Samsung One UI, there are certain things which I like, which is firstly the routines and modes, which I feel that it is a little geeky in terms of what they offer, but it is good to have for someone like me who can customize it. So for example, there is one where I could adjust based on where my location is to switch the phone from sound to silent, putting the speaker to 0% in case I actually forgot to switch it back to 0% when I'm at work. So there won't be any accidental loud media if I were to accidentally open one, say on WhatsApp, and there's a video that I want to view and I didn't know that my volume is at 100%, and it will be very embarrassing for me in office. And other standard things like the reachability, one-hand usage, all these are still intact even though it has reached a 5.1 iteration of the Samsung One UI. I also like how customizable the phone is, from the home screen to the lock screen to the always on display, and these are things which are nice to have for us to tune it to however I like it. So two more things I want to mention about the experience of the phone is firstly the speaker. I like how the phone has stereo speakers, so it gives that surround sound feeling, especially watching shows in landscape mode. In portrait mode, it doesn't really matter because the sound is firing towards you. But in my opinion, I feel that the speaker sounds good and loud enough, especially in a room environment like this. Secondly is the haptic feedback. This haptic feedback is not something mushy and cheap. The overall typing experience is really good, even though it is not strong enough compared to the flagship devices out there. And moving to the cameras, you could see here there's three circular design which is very similar to the S series in terms of the design profile, and it has the main camera which is 50 megapixel with OIS. It has a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera and a 5 megapixel macro camera, and at the front you have a 32 megapixel selfie camera. Through my experience of using the different cameras, most of the time I would actually use the main camera a lot, and I feel that the main camera does a pretty good job in taking photos, whether it is daytime or nighttime or even in tough situations. For the ultra wide camera, as long as there is adequate lighting, it does a decent job. When it comes to nighttime, it struggles quite a bit, especially in a very dark environment. Even if I were to force it to switch on night mode, it is still a pretty dark and grainy photo. For the macro camera, I feel that it is okay. It is not those 2 megapixel bad macro camera, but it would be better if the ultra wide lens have a macro capability. For the selfie camera, I feel that it is quite decent. It has two different modes, which is the regular and a slightly ultra wide mode, even though it's only a singular lens. And for nighttime, you could see that it is a little grainy, especially when it does not have enough light. But with night mode, it does help brighten the photo quite a bit compared to the ultra wide camera. So in terms of the ranking of the different lenses, I feel that the main camera does the best, followed by the selfie camera, and lastly the ultra wide camera. For the camera shooting experience, however, I noticed that what you see in the viewfinder and what is the end result is two different photos. And I feel that the viewfinder gives a low quality photo compared to what you're captured at the end. And for nighttime, in certain scenarios where it is pretty dark, there's a moon icon at the bottom that shows in yellow that will automatically turn on night mode. However, if you do not want night mode, you could just press the icon at the bottom to switch it off. For night mode photos, it does take a pretty bright photo, especially for the main camera. As you can see, the viewfinder shows that it is rather dim, but then what you capture is quite a bright photo. So I feel that it is a nice photo indeed, but is it really true to what you're seeing? That is another question to think about. But for night mode, it does take a while to capture the photo, so you probably have to wait up to like 5 seconds depending on how dark your area is to capture the photo. For the main camera, the default setting is Full HD at 30 FPS, and because it has OIS, I feel that the footage is quite stable in my opinion. There is also the Super Steady mode, but I feel that the quality is lower even though it is still at Full HD 30 FPS. But if you want a better quality, this phone can shoot 4K 30 FPS as well, but as you can see, it is not as stable as the Full HD version. For the ultra wide camera, the default setting is also 1080 at 30 FPS, and I feel that the footage is quite stable even though it doesn't have OIS if I'm not wrong, so this should be purely on EIS. There is also the option to shoot 4K 30 FPS for the ultra wide camera, but you can see the Stability of the camera isn't as strong as 1080p. This is similar to the main camera. For the selfie camera, the default setting is also 1080 at 30fps, which is similar to the main and ultra-wide camera. As you can see, the footage is quite stable, but the crop is quite a lot, and I'm holding the phone at arm's length, and all you could see is just my head and a little bit of my shoulder. There is also the option to shoot 4K 30fps for the selfie camera, but you can see the crop isn't as much compared to the Full HD version, so I expect the footage to be slightly shakier compared to the Full HD version. And finally, nighttime. This is the main camera, Full HD at 30fps. There is no night mode or anything, so what you see is what you get. And this is the 4K 30fps for the main camera. Similar features where the shakiness is present in the 4K version compared to the Full HD version. And this is the ultra-wide camera. You could see that the footage is somewhat grainy compared to the main camera. And this is the 4K footage of the ultra-wide camera. It's still kind of washed out, so it doesn't really add on to the quality compared to the main camera. Lastly, the selfie camera. This is 1080 at 30fps. And this is 4K at 30fps. Generally, I feel that this is better than the ultra-wide camera. So in terms of ranking, probably the main, followed by the selfie, and lastly the ultra-wide camera. So moving away from the camera and videos, the next thing to talk about is battery. This phone comes in 5000 mAh battery, which is quite a big number, and it supports 25 watt charging, but there isn't a charger in a box, as you can see how slim the box is. Just nice, my mom has a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE and she has a 25 watt external charger, and I use it to charge the A54. And the time taken to charge from 0 to 100 for me is about 1.5 hours or slightly less than that. And in terms of battery life, to me, because of how light of a user I am, as usual, the phone can last me up to 2 days before I need to recharge the phone. There is no wireless charging in case you're wondering, and to me it's perfectly alright. So the last thing to talk about is price. This phone starts at $588 and you could get it at $648 if you opt for the 256 gigs of internal storage. Both are of the same RAM, which is 8 gigs of RAM. And there are 4 colors for this phone. Mine is violet. The other 3 colors are lime, silver, and graphite. They all have the name awesome in front of it, in case you are wondering. Is it really an awesome phone? I feel that yes. There are a couple of things which I like, which are firstly the main camera. It does a pretty good job in terms of day and night usage, and it comes with OIS. It has an IP67 water and dust resistant, which is definitely good to have. I like the overall design of it, whether it is the back or the front. The back design is similar to the S series, which gives that premium feeling to it, and the front screen, in terms of the bezel, it is very uniform and minimal on all 4 sides, and it is a Super AMOLED screen that is very readable under the sunlight. I like the battery capacity. It has 5000 mAh battery, which is a pretty big battery in my opinion. On the flip side, one of the things that I dislike about the phone is the lack of charger. And even if it does include a charger, 25 watt charging is a little slow compared to those who can charge their phone in 30 to 40 minutes. This one takes up to 1.5 hours to fully charge it, so that is a little slow in terms of the waiting time to fully juice up the phone. Secondly, the camera department. The 4K videos on all 3 cameras do not have any form of stabilization. And lastly, the amount of pre-installed applications in all Samsung devices. I feel that it is really a lot. It's a good thing that you could actually uninstall them, but still, the amount of space when I go to the storage, when I view, is 1/4 of what I have. So if the phone actually starts at 64 gigs, half the storage is probably gone at the start of using the phone. But yeah, other than that, there are a lot of things that I like about the phone more than I dislike, and I feel that what you're paying and what you're getting is really worth it. So if you enjoyed this video, do give it a like, do comment down if you have any opinions, and do subscribe for future videos like this. Thanks for watching.